The moment you stop chasing, you stop bleeding. Have you ever noticed, my friends, that when you finally pull away from someone, when you disappear hoping they'll panic, sometimes they don't? That silence you thought would shake their world feels like it only echoed in yours. That's because disappearing was never the destination. It was only the doorway. The real game begins after the vanishing act. Now, imagine this. You walk out of someone's life like a magician dropping the smoke bomb. Poof, gone. You expect them to gasp, to realize your worth, to feel the loss like a missing heartbeat. But instead, you find yourself checking your phone, replaying moments, wondering if they even noticed. That's the trap, folks. We disappear thinking it's power, but all we've done is pause our performance, not rewrite the play. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The problem is, most people disappear physically, but stay mentally chained. You may have vanished from their messages, but you're still performing in your mind, running invisible rehearsals of what if. You're still handing them the script to your emotions. See, disappearing looks cool online. The no-contact rule, the silent treatment, the mysterious vanishing act. It all sounds like some secret Stoic move. But here's the truth. If your silence is driven by pain, it leaks. People feel it. Energy doesn't lie. You can stop talking, but if your mind is still screaming for attention, your silence isn't a strategy. It's just noise without sound. Picture a fire. When you walk away, the flames might die, but if you leave the embers alive inside your chest, you're still burning, alone. That's what happens when you disappear but don't transform. You end up trapped in what I call emotional echo mode. You think you're detached, but you're just waiting, checking, hoping they'll feel the silence. That's not peace, that's a performance of strength. But what if you disappeared and rebuilt? What if your silence wasn't just absence, but evolution? Imagine turning your disappearance into a metamorphosis, like a snake shedding its skin, not to escape, but to grow into something sharper, calmer, and more aware. That's when the real fear sets in, not for you, but for them, because people don't fear losing what they've already taken for granted. They fear losing what they can no longer read, reach, or replace. You don't need to disappear to make them miss you. You need to evolve so completely that they can't find you in the same place they left you, not physically, not emotionally, not energetically. When your silence stops asking, "Did they notice?" and starts saying, "I've changed," everything shifts. And I'll tell you something funny about human psychology. People always assume they're in control until silence stops reacting to their noise. They think they can predict you, pull you back, spark a reaction. But when you're calm, when you don't need to prove anything, they start to panic. It's like arguing with the ocean. You can scream all you want, but the waves won't explain themselves. That's the essence of Stoic power. Not disappearing to be mysterious, but disappearing to master yourself. You're not hiding, you're healing. You're not punishing, you're preparing. You're building a version of yourself so solid that even if they came back tomorrow, they'd have no access to who you've become. So today, my friends, we're not talking about disappearing. We're talking about what comes after. Because silence is only powerful when it reflects transformation, not desperation. The next phase is where real control begins, where your absence becomes architecture, not escape. Stay with me. What's coming next will show you how to turn silence into strategy, mystery into magnetism, and absence into authority. You're not going to vanish, you're going to evolve. Type it in the comments right now, "I evolve in silence." And if you haven't yet, press that like button, subscribe, and let's rebuild your power together, quietly but completely. Number 1. The illusion of disappearing. Running away from the noise doesn't make you silent. It just makes the noise louder inside your head. They think disappearing will make them powerful. That silence will make the other person feel their absence so deeply that regret will follow like a shadow. They vanish hoping to be missed, but instead they end up missing themselves. Because here's the truth, my friends, disappearing doesn't create strength if you're still mentally kneeling to the memory. You can walk out of their life, delete their number, stop checking their stories, and still wake up every morning chained to the same thought. Will they ever realize what they lost? That's not freedom. That's an emotional exile with prettier scenery. Imagine someone locking themselves inside a quiet room, thinking they've escaped the chaos outside. But the noise they were running from wasn't in the street. It was in their own mind. That's what happens when they disappear without detaching. They mistake silence for power, when in truth it's only potential waiting to be shaped. Stoicism teaches that withdrawal without awareness is just delay, and delay, in emotional terms, is disguised dependence. They might not say it out loud, but deep down they hope the absence will sting the other person. They hope one day their phone will light up with that message, "I miss you." But hope, when it comes from ego, is the slowest poison there is. It gives you a taste of control without the substance. It feels powerful in the moment, but it feeds dependency quietly. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Most people disappear to control the outside event, the reaction. The wise disappear to control the inside storm, the reaction within. Let's break a lie right now. They think if they disappear long enough, the other person will suddenly understand their worth. But worth isn't proven through absence. It's proven through evolution. People don't chase what disappears, they chase what changes. If you vanish and come back the same, you'll just remind them why they left. Silence alone doesn't rewrite your story. Transformation does. But transformation isn't easy, and that's why most never reach it. Because the moment you try to rebuild, fear whispers. What if they forget me? What if I move on and they come back? What if I change and they don't even notice? Those are the ghosts of emotional dependence, the shadows that follow every step toward detachment. Fear convinces them to wait instead of work, to imagine instead of evolve. And waiting is just another form of chasing in disguise. Think of silence like a field after a storm. It looks peaceful on the surface, but underneath, the soil is still soaked with emotion. You can't plant new seeds until you dry the ground. That's what rebuilding feels like. The old emotions must settle before new strength can take root. Most people can't sit through that dryness. They break the silence too soon, reaching out for the same comfort that broke them in the first place. But discipline means learning to sit in the stillness until peace replaces panic. They tell themselves, "I'll show them by disappearing." But who are they really trying to show? Because if the goal is still to be seen, it's not power, it's performance. Real silence doesn't scream for attention, it radiates self-control. The quieter you become inside, the louder your absence feels to others. But you can't fake that kind of quiet. It has to be earned through patience, through self-respect, through the hard truth that sometimes you're not the one they'll regret losing, but you'll always be the one who learned how to rise. I'll give you an image, folks. Picture two mountains. One erupts, loud, fiery, dramatic. Everyone watches. The other stands still, seemingly unchanged. But inside, the pressure builds, the structure strengthens, the layers deepen. Years later, when the dust settles, which mountain still stands tall? That's the difference between disappearing to be noticed and disappearing to become stronger. One collapses under attention, the other endures in silence. They think silence is a punishment, But real Stoic silence isn't a punishment. It's preparation. It's training in disguise. Every day of silence teaches them control over the impulse to react, to chase, to seek closure. The absence becomes their dojo. Every emotion that rises without an outlet becomes a lesson in discipline. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about mastering it. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. But let's be honest, it hurts. The waiting, the wondering, the nights when the phone doesn't buzz. It feels like you're losing. It feels like your silence doesn't matter. And that's where most fall apart. They start doubting the process, thinking, maybe if I reach out, it'll fix things. No, my friends, you don't fix a broken pattern by repeating it. You fix it by breaking it. Your silence isn't meant to be heard by them. It's meant to be felt by you. It's the sound of reclaiming your emotional energy. Disappearing without self-mastery is like leaving a battlefield without your weapon. You might have walked away, but you're still vulnerable to every thought that reminds you of them. But when you learn to sit in that silence without fear, something changes. You start seeing your own patterns, your own weaknesses, and you start training them out of existence. That's where power begins. Not when they miss you, but when you stop missing who you were with them. It's difficult because disappearing forces you to face yourself. There's no noise to distract you, no messages to feed your ego, no drama to give you purpose. Just you, and that's terrifying at first. But that's also where peace hides. In the quiet corners where you meet your real self for the first time. The one who doesn't need validation. The one who doesn't chase. The one who simply is. Eventually, they'll look back and realize something's different. Not because you posted a quote or changed your status, but because your silence stopped performing and started reflecting power. And that's when fear blooms. The fear of losing the version of you they can no longer reach. So, my friends, remember this. Disappearing is not the victory. It's the initiation. It's the first door you walk through before you find the real path to peace. Don't vanish to make them curious. Vanish to make yourself complete. Build yourself in that quiet. Grow roots so deep that no storm can pull you out again. Write this in the comments right now. My silence is my strength. Show yourself that you're not running anymore. You're rising. Show the world that silence isn't your retreat. It's your rebirth. Because what's coming next will teach you how to turn that silence into something even deeper. The kind of energy they can feel long after they've stopped hearing your name. Number 2. The psychological weight of their return. They don't fear your silence, they fear what you become inside it. When they come back, they expect to find the same person they left, the one who used to answer too quickly, overthink too deeply, care too loudly. They think your silence was a phase, a little performance of pride. But when your energy no longer bends toward them, when your words don't chase, when your tone is calm instead of wounded, something in them shifts. The air changes. They can feel it, even through a text. That's the psychological weight of your return. It's not about what you say. It's about what they no longer recognize. My friends, it's like walking into your old house and realizing the furniture's gone, the pictures are off the walls, and even the smell has changed. You expected nostalgia, but all you feel is distance. That's how they feel when you reappear transformed. They don't see punishment, they see evolution, and evolution terrifies comfort, because your calm makes their chaos visible. They used to know how to read you, every sigh, every silence, every reaction. They thought they had your emotional code cracked, but now they send a message and wait longer than they ever did. They test you, expecting the old you to peek through, but you don't. You respond differently, sometimes slowly, sometimes not at all. and suddenly they realize they no longer have the script. That loss of predictability is what makes their ego flinch. You see, most people don't fear losing someone. They fear losing control of how that person sees them. When you take away their ability to predict your emotions, you take away their power, and that's when the panic begins. Silence, once dismissed as weakness, now feels like a locked door they can't open. The same door they once slammed behind them. There's a quote I love: "When you change, you don't lose people. You lose the version of you that tolerated them." Think about that. Your silence isn't revenge, it's renovation. You didn't vanish to make them chase. You vanished to rebuild the foundation they cracked. And when you return, stronger, clearer, colder, they don't recognize the structure anymore. That's not attitude, that's growth. But here's the trap. Most people ruin this phase because they break the silence for validation. They want to show how much they've changed instead of being the change. They drop subtle hints, post quotes, act mysterious. But mystery can't be manufactured. It has to be lived. If you still crave reaction, you haven't evolved. You've just rebranded your attachment. True transformation doesn't need to prove itself. It just exists, quietly, powerfully. When they come back, you'll feel that pull, the old desire to be seen, to be understood, to show them what they missed. But remember this, folks. If you have to prove your value, you're still negotiating your worth. And your worth was never up for debate. They'll come back out of curiosity, not conscience, to see if the door's still open, not to rebuild what they broke. That's where your test begins. Not in their message, but in your reaction to it. And I get it. It's hard. You waited for that moment, didn't you? You imagined what you'd say, how it would feel, what kind of poetic justice it'd be to see their name pop up after all that silence. But that's the moment where power slips if you're not careful. Because if your heart races when they return, if your calm cracks when they speak, it means you were waiting all along. The goal was never to make them reach out. It was to get to a point where it wouldn't matter if they did. Your growth has to be silent enough to confuse them and strong enough to stabilize you. When you truly detach, their message won't shake you. It'll simply remind you of how far you've come. It's like seeing an old reflection of yourself and realizing you've outgrown the mirror. They might still speak the same language, but you've moved to a different frequency. They'll sense it too. The tone in your voice, the stillness in your energy, the lack of emotional spikes. They'll notice, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you no longer move from the same place. That's what makes them uncomfortable. You've turned their safe script into uncertainty. They used to expect your emotions to orbit theirs. Now, they can't even find your gravity. You know what's beautiful, my friends? When they realize they no longer inspire reaction, they start to feel the emptiness they once left in you. That's the real mirror effect of silence. You don't throw pain back at them. You let time and transformation do it for you. Every calm response, every unanswered message, every delayed reaction becomes a reminder that they no longer own emotional real estate in your mind. The psychological weight of your return doesn't come from coldness. It comes from peace. Peace is intimidating to those addicted to control. They can't manipulate calm energy. They can only wonder how you found it. And when wondering turns to worrying, that's when fear of loss begins. So the next time they reappear, don't treat it as validation. Treat it as verification. Proof that your silence worked, that your evolution created curiosity where once there was comfort. You don't need to play games. Just stand in your stillness and let it speak. The calmest person in the room always has the most power. Remember this line: they left thinking you'd break. You rebuilt in silence. That's how the story flips. You don't rise by reacting. You rise by becoming unrecognizable to your old patterns. Write this down in the comments right now. I am the calm they can't control. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that your silence isn't empty, it's echoing with evolution. Because what's coming next, my friends, will show you how to make that calm energy not just felt, but feared. Stay with me. Number 3, the energy shift. They can't decode. People fear what they can't read, and nothing is harder to read than someone who has found peace. There comes a moment, my friends, when your silence stops being awkward and starts being powerful. When the energy around you changes so subtly that even those who once dismissed you start to sense it. They can't explain it, but they feel it. The way you walk into a room differently, the way your words have weight, or the way your absence lingers longer than your presence ever did. That's the energy shift they can't decode. It's not loud, it's not announced, it's quiet, steady, and terrifying to anyone who once fed on your emotional reactions. See, they remember the old you, the one who over-explained, over-cared, overshared, the one whose silence wasn't peace, but pain wearing a mask. They knew that version. They could predict that version. But now they sense something different. You're still quiet, but not in defeat. You're calm, not because you're numb, but because you've outgrown the noise. That's what confuses them. You've turned the storm into still water, and still water is dangerous. It reflects truth too clearly. Imagine a radio they once tuned into daily, knowing every frequency, every emotion. Now when they try to connect, all they hear is static. The channel they used to control no longer exists. You've changed the frequency. That's what evolution feels like, not revenge, but redirection. You're not broadcasting pain anymore. You're operating on peace, and peace doesn't entertain noise. They'll start to test it, of course. They always do. A random message, a memory thrown your way, a subtle attempt to read the temperature of your energy. But what used to ignite an emotional storm now barely causes a ripple. That's when panic sets in, not because you've ignored them, but because you didn't even flinch. The energy that once danced around them now moves like it answers to no one. They can't decode what they can't disturb. And that's when their ego begins to unravel, because human psychology is wired for patterns. When people lose a familiar emotional pattern, it feels like losing control. They knew how to make you react. They could predict when you'd reach out, when you'd stay silent, when you'd break. But your new energy, it doesn't operate on their timeline anymore. You've become unpredictable, not through games, but through growth. There's a quote that fits perfectly here. When nothing can hurt you, everything loses its power over you. The same silence that once made you anxious now makes you magnetic, because people are drawn to what they can't define. You've become that, undefinable. You no longer react from need, you respond from choice. And that, my friends, is emotional mastery. But let's be real, it wasn't easy getting here. The transformation that creates this shift usually feels lonely. You'll have moments when you doubt your calm, when you miss the chaos because it used to give you identity. When you start healing, peace feels strange at first, almost empty. But stay with it. That emptiness isn't lack, it's space. Space for power to grow, space for clarity to enter. They, on the other hand, will feel that space as distance. They'll think something's missing, your warmth, your softness, your emotional availability. They won't realize that what's missing isn't love, it's their control over your emotional gravity. You've removed the hooks quietly, one by one. And now, when they pull, nothing moves. That's how they know something's changed. This is why silence after transformation hits differently. Before, your silence was a reaction. Now, it's a reflection. It doesn't say, I'm waiting, it says, I've arrived. The version of you that once begged for closure has been replaced by one that doesn't need doors to close because you've already walked into a new room entirely. Here's the beauty of it. This shift doesn't require announcement. You don't need to prove your peace. It shows, it radiates in your posture, in your tone, in how little you need to explain yourself anymore. True calm can't be faked. It's felt. People start noticing that they can't trigger you, and it unsettles them more than any argument ever could. You've stopped being their mirror. Now they're left to face their own reflection alone. So, when they can't read your energy anymore, they'll start projecting. You've changed. You're cold. You don't care. Take it as confirmation. They're not describing you. They're describing their loss of control. The game they used to win without effort now has no rules. You've rewritten the emotional equation entirely. And this is the truth most never accept. Peace is the loudest answer to chaos. You don't have to prove you've moved on. Your energy will do it for you. The shift speaks louder than any speech could. They feel it in every delayed reply, in every neutral tone, in every moment you don't feed the fire. Because you've learned that attention is currency, and you're done spending it where it never earned interest. So, my friends, when they can't decode you anymore, don't explain yourself. Let them wonder. Let them spiral in the silence they once ignored. You've earned this calm. You've turned absence into authority. You've made stillness your strongest move. Write it in the comments right now. My calm confuses them. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that your silence isn't weakness. It's a language they no longer understand. And stay with me, because what's coming next will take this even deeper when detachment stops being distant and becomes destiny. Number 4. Detachment that feels like distance. Detachment isn't coldness. It's warmth, finally directed inward. There comes a time, my friends, when silence turns into something deeper, when you're no longer trying to prove that you've moved on because your energy already says it for you. Detachment isn't pretending not to care. It's realizing you no longer need to. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that peace doesn't need witnesses. And that's what begins to frighten them. The moment they realize your distance isn't punishment anymore, it's protection. At first, they thought your silence was a strategy, a move to make them notice, a game of emotional chess. But real detachment doesn't play games, it ends them. You're not trying to be mysterious, you've simply stopped performing, you've stopped explaining, defending, chasing, proving, and the energy that once wrapped around them now folds back into you. Imagine standing on a shore, watching a ship sail away. At first, you wave, hoping it'll turn around. But after a while, your arm grows tired, the horizon swallows the ship, and you realize something. Maybe it was never your job to make it come back. That's detachment. It's not anger, it's acceptance. It's not that you stopped loving, it's that you stopped losing yourself in love. They can feel that, even if you never say a word. Because energy doesn't lie. You don't respond to the same triggers anymore. You don't argue where you used to. You don't rush to fix what's already fallen apart. That's the part that scares them, not your silence, but your serenity. Because your stillness used to mean waiting. Now it means freedom. Here's the lie most people believe. That detachment means you stop feeling. No, my friends, detachment means you start feeling everything without being controlled by it. You still care, you just don't crumble. You still remember, you just don't relive. You start to see things for what they are, not for what your emotions once painted them to be. That kind of clarity is rare, and that's why it's feared. People can handle your anger, they can handle your sadness, but your indifference, That's the one storm they can't predict. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Detachment is mastering that reaction. It's choosing peace over participation. It's learning to watch chaos without inviting it inside your mind. And yes, at first it feels strange. It feels like distance. It feels like you're colder, quieter, maybe even a little lonely. But that loneliness isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for power to grow. Space for peace to breathe. They'll sense it immediately. The messages that once pulled you in now hang unanswered. The invitations that used to tempt you now meet polite decline, and your calm responses will start to feel heavier than your old explanations ever did, because the person they could once emotionally provoke doesn't exist anymore. You've detached, not out of revenge, but out of rebirth. And that's when the shift happens. They start reaching, not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of themselves that had control over you. They'll test you with memories, jokes, nostalgia. But nothing hits like it used to. You've become emotionally fluent, and they only speak the old language of manipulation and attention. You're no longer listening. It's hard, I know. The ego still whispers, "What if they move on completely? What if they forget me?" But that's the trick, the one that keeps you stuck. You're not supposed to be remembered as you were. You're supposed to be unreachable as you are now. Detachment makes you a different presence entirely, still kind, still strong, but no longer available for emotional negotiation. You'll start to notice something magical. Peace begins to feel addictive. You stop craving drama because it costs too much energy. You stop replaying old stories because they no longer fit who you're becoming. You start to see your worth, not as something they validate, but as something that simply exists, unbothered, unshakable, unquestioned. That's when your detachment stops being distant and becomes defined. The people who once took your energy for granted will start to sense it's gone, and that's when fear creeps in. Not because you're gone, but because you're gone differently. You're not bitter, you're balanced. You're not angry, you're anchored. You're not running, you're rooted. That's the kind of energy that makes people look back and whisper, "I lost something I'll never understand again." So let them wonder. Let them feel the absence of your old self. You don't owe anyone your chaos just because they're uncomfortable with your calm. You've earned this detachment. It's your reward for surviving the noise. Don't let guilt pull you back into emotional debt. You're not heartless, you're healed. Write it in the comments right now. My peace is my power. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that your detachment isn't cold, it's clarity. You've learned to love from a distance, to care without collapse, to stand without shaking. And stay with me, because what's coming next will go even deeper, when your peace starts to make them panic. Number 5, the fear of losing control. People don't fear losing you. They fear losing their power over you. Here's what they won't admit, my friends. It's never really about you being gone. It's about them no longer being able to move you. When they can't predict your emotions, can't trigger a reaction, can't pull the old strings that once worked so easily, that's when fear sets in. It's not heartbreak they feel, it's withdrawal. They've lost the emotional control they used to take for granted, and that absence feels like chaos to them. At first, they tell themselves you're just acting strong. They convince themselves your silence is temporary, your detachment is a show, your calm is a costume. But deep down, something starts to whisper. What if it's real this time? What if the same person who used to bend now stands unshaken? That's the kind of fear that keeps people up at night, not because they care too much, but because they're losing something they never thought they'd have to earn. Imagine this. For the longest time, they had the remote to your emotions. Every word, every look, every text was a button they knew exactly how to press. They could turn your joy into doubt, your peace into panic, your silence into questions. But now they press those same buttons and nothing happens. The screen stays dark, the signal's gone. That's the moment the ego realizes it's lost control. And the human ego, oh, it hates losing control more than anything. They'll start testing it in small ways. A casual message, a like on an old post, a friendly, "Hey, how have you been?" But what they're really asking is, can I still reach you? And when your energy doesn't flinch, when you don't jump, when you don't explain, when your silence feels stable, that's when the panic grows. Because now it's not just your attention that's gone, it's their influence. There's a quote by Seneca that fits perfectly here. He who is brave is free. Freedom isn't about walking away. It's about walking away without being pulled back. When your emotions are no longer tethered to their approval, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. They can't anticipate you anymore. They can't decode your tone, can't measure your reactions, can't play the same emotional games. That's when their confidence starts to crumble and your calm starts to echo. You see, people who thrive on control depend on your emotional participation. They feed on your reactions, good or bad, it doesn't matter. As long as you respond, they feel relevant. The moment you stop responding from emotion, the dynamic collapses. They're left talking to silence, and silence doesn't negotiate. It just reflects. And that reflection hurts, because now they see what they really lost, not your presence, but their position in your mind. They're no longer the center of your emotional universe. They've gone from power to background noise. That's when they start overcompensating. The same person who once ignored your messages may now send subtle reminders, hoping you'll break the calm. But the truth is, you've already broken the cycle. Their attempts to pull you back are just echoes trying to find life again. This stage is tricky, folks, because this is where you'll be tempted to prove your growth, to show them you're unbothered. But remember, real strength doesn't perform. It is. You don't have to prove you've changed. Your peace already proves it. Every calm reply, every delayed response, every moment of restraint builds a wall they can't climb. You don't even need to block them. Your indifference is the real barrier. But let's be honest, it's not easy. The urge to react still whispers. You'll feel it when you see their name, when you sense them watching, when old memories resurface. Your mind will say, just one message, just one reply, but pause. Because every time you react, you re-enter the game, and the game is designed to drain your peace. You've already won by stepping off the board. When they realize their words no longer have weight, that their silence no longer stings you, something flips in their mind. They start to see you differently. They can't frame you as emotional anymore. They can't manipulate through guilt or confusion. You've become something else entirely, an unknown variable, and people fear what they can't define. That's where real psychological power begins, when you no longer react out of emotion, but respond out of intention. You're not playing defense anymore. You've become the calm they can't shake. That calm is intimidating. It's mysterious. It makes them question their own impact. And that question, my friends, is the beginning of their downfall. Because the more they try to regain control, the more obvious it becomes that they never really had it. They only had your cooperation. Once you take that back, their power evaporates. You're not fighting them. You're starving the system that kept you stuck. So remember this, the fear of losing control will make them reach, test, and tempt you. But your peace will always speak louder than their panic. Let them feel that silence. Let them learn that access is no longer free. Write it in the comments right now. I am no longer controlled. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that your power doesn't come from taking back control of them, but from never needing it again. Stay with me, because next we'll go deeper into what happens when silence turns into a mirror and they're finally forced to face what they've been running from. Number 6. The mirror effect. When you stop playing. Silence doesn't punish people. It reveals them. When you finally stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood, something strange happens. The silence that once felt heavy becomes a mirror, and in that mirror they start to see themselves. At first, they won't like the reflection, because for the first time, they can't hide behind your reactions, your forgiveness, or your attention. Your absence starts showing them the truth they've been avoiding all along. They weren't in control. You were just giving them access. My friends, this is what I call the mirror effect. It's the psychological point where your silence becomes too quiet to ignore. They look at you and see the person they could have had but didn't value. They see the loyalty they took for granted, the peace they mistook for weakness, the love they mishandled because they thought it would always be there. You don't have to lecture them. You don't have to post quotes. Your evolution becomes the loudest sermon they'll ever hear. Think of it like a bright light suddenly switched on in a messy room. When you were still reacting, your emotions were the noise that distracted them from the truth. But now that you've gone still, there's nowhere for them to hide. They can see the mess clearly, and for the first time, it's theirs. That's why silence cuts deeper than anger. Anger gives them fuel. Silence gives them reflection. You might think they're not affected. You might think they've moved on. But understand this. Silence doesn't need an audience to make an impact. It works quietly, inside their conscience, slowly echoing through the moments they thought they'd forget. Every time they see your name, a memory flashes. Every time they feel peace around someone else, they compare it to the peace they once had with you and realize it's not the same. That's how the mirror works. It doesn't chase. It simply reflects truth until the other person can't unsee it. There's a saying, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits. And that's exactly what your silence does. It waits. It lets time, regret, and realization do the talking. Because the person who once needed closure will eventually become the closure. You were the lesson they didn't want, but life made sure they got it. And here's the beautiful twist. While they're facing the reflection of who they were, you're facing the reflection of who you've become. You're no longer defined by what happened to you. You're defined by how you responded to it, with discipline, grace, and emotional control. That's real power. That's stoicism in motion. Not loud, not dramatic, but stable and self-assured. They'll start to notice that their usual tactics don't work anymore. The guilt trips, the emotional bait, the nostalgia, they fall flat. Not because you've turned heartless, but because you've turned inward. You've stopped playing the game entirely. You're not competing, not proving, not seeking validation. And that drives them crazy, because control only exists where reaction does. When reaction dies, control dies with it. The mirror effect forces them to sit with their own silence, and most people can't handle that. They'll replay moments trying to make sense of how they lost grip. They'll tell themselves you changed, when really you just stopped participating in your own manipulation. They'll say you became distant, when in truth, you just came home to yourself. Let me tell you, folks, that's what true peace feels like. It's when you can walk away without bitterness, when you can wish them well and still mean it because your happiness no longer depends on whether they ever understood you. Detachment becomes compassion, not coldness. Forgiveness becomes clarity, not weakness. You stop trying to make people get it and start appreciating that you got yourself back. That's why the mirror effect is so powerful. It flips the dynamic completely. The one who once begged for closure becomes the one who is closure. The one who used to be emotionally predictable becomes the one they can't read anymore. You don't just exit the story, you rewrite the ending. You walk away with peace, and they stay behind with reflection. And yes, it's poetic justice in a way. Not revenge, but balance. The universe always finds a way to show people what they refuse to see. And the person who once ignored your silence will eventually start hearing it in everything they do. You don't need to send reminders. Your energy already speaks volumes. So here's what I want you to remember. When you stop playing, you start winning. When you stop proving, you start rising. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. This is the new chapter, the one where peace becomes your language and presence your power. Write this in the comments right now. My silence speaks truth. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that you don't need noise to be heard and you don't need closure to be free. And before you go, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because the more people we help rise above emotional chaos, the stronger this community of peace becomes. Stay grounded, stay focused, and stay free. Your silence is not the end of your story, my friends. It's the beginning of your power.